Fed. Is Congressman Barney Frank of Massachusetts, who is the chair of the House Financial Services Committee, sitting on it, even though more than half the members of the House are co-sponsors? Is there any more push toward it becoming law in light of the President's proposals to have the Fed, of all abominable institutions, be the principal regulator of financial institutions in the country?
Well, I don't think we're at a dead end yet with the Banking Committee or with Chairman Frank, although things are moving slower than I would like. We had a hearing scheduled a week or so ago, and it came up on a Wednesday, and the Feds had a meeting, and we were supposed to review this type of regulations in general, and he assured me this was the time to start talking about 1207, and then later on he would have another hearing dealing only with 1207. Well, that particular hearing was canceled because the Federal Reserve was in session and they couldn't come over. And then we had this week out of Washington, so it remains to be seen on whether something will come up next week. But we're getting awfully close to wondering whether we're going a little bit slower than he's been more or less assuring me. But so far, I'm still hoping he'll come through with his promises that he will hold hearings on it.
Just as a matter of the rules of the House of Representatives, could a single person, whether the Speaker or the chair of the appropriate committee, stop a bill from getting to the floor that had more than half the members of the House as co-sponsors?
Oh, sure. That's very easy. They just don't bring it up because they have monopoly control of the floor. So the Speaker ultimately has the say, and, of course, the majority leader has a lot to say. So Hoyer could bring it up tomorrow if he wants, unless Pelosi objected to it. But that's the way it works all the time. But it has been anticipated that this might happen. That's why there's a rule of discharge petition. Some people think if you have more than 218 people sign on that they have to bring it to the floor. That's only if you have 218 sign on a discharge petition. Those 72 Democrats that have signed on to the bill will not be signing a discharge petition. That's
all right,
got two of them, you'd be lucky. And that's why people, some of our allies are a little bit frustrated with me for not immediately starting a discharge petition. And that will not work. And besides, it will just slow up the process. It will sort of mess up what I'm trying to do now to try to encourage it through the routine channels. But no, 200. You could have 300 co-sponsors. They do not need to bring it up unless you have a discharge petition signed.
So much for what Jefferson called the People's House,
yeah.
The House of Representatives. On this 4th of July, it's such a joy to be speaking to the champion of personal liberty in the House of Representatives and, I think, in all of the government. How would an audit of the Fed work? I mean, who would conduct the audit? And would it ever actually happen, or would the Fed just as soon go away or go somewhere before we learn the truth about it? I mean, the truth could be so horrendous that the reaction to the truth would be cataclysmic. There would be some unintended consequence that the Fed might lose all its power.
Yeah. Well, the GAO would do it. That's who does the audits, and they're supposed to be, independent, and they have a pretty good reputation. But they have been prohibited by law, so if we repeal that prohibition, yes, they have to go in and do it. The bill is written, so they have to do it within a year. And I think it would be remarkable to find out exactly what they've done, what they've agreed to, what kind of commitments they made, what kind of collaborations with other central banks. So I don't think they're going to be very happy with that. And I think as things move along, and they may have already stopped it by gotten an assurance from Nancy Pelosi that it will never come to the floor. But we don't know that yet, and we might be able to get it on another bill, so we can't come to that conclusion. But as far as what the Fed might do, is they will resist it all the way. I think right now the big plan is that, and I think they understand that the dollar reserve standard is done, and they will not go back to that. And that's what you hear about when the Chinese and others, who have a lot of clout now, saying that we have to go to a new system. We have to go to the IMF. We're going to have another world currency. And so by the time we get the books open, they'll probably have some new deal going on someplace else.
Congressman Paul, on this 4th of July weekend, I'm bombarded with even more emails, you probably are as well, than I usually get. And the central question is almost always the same, and it's very poignant this weekend. What can freedom-loving Americans do to get freedom back? I mean, there is not a Ron Paul running for office in every state and in every congressional district, and frequently it's a choice, as Barry Goldwater used to say, between Tweedledee and Tweedledum. But what can those of us who don't want Tweedledee or Tweedledum do?
Well, all I know is it's probably going to be different for every single one. You do your share of the work, and you do it your way, and you have a platform. I do it my way, and others will have to find a way to do it. They can help you. They can help me. They can run for office. But I think the most important thing still is studying. I mean, how long did it take you to figure out all this? It took me a long time. You know, I figured I had to unlearn a lot of things that were pumped into my head. So it probably took me 15 or 20 years to figure this whole thing out. So I think the most important thing people do is they study and understand our history, our Constitution, what liberty is all about, and there'll be a place for you. And, of course, we're very much involved with the campaign for liberties. Others can join us in that effort, but every individual has a role and a responsibility. And I tell people at my rallies that if you've discovered this and you've figured it out and you know what's wrong, you have a greater burden of responsibility than the people who just go about their daily activities. They don't know, they don't care. Once you discover this, it just is very natural. You have a great deal of responsibility, and that's where I think we are making some inroads. But it's a personal choice. To me, it's education and become politically active.
Congressman Ron Paul, it's always a pleasure. Happy 4th of July to you, Congressman. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you. Joining me now in the studio, David Bruckner, who teaches at Columbia University and who is a regular on the Glenn Beck Show and frequently with me, whether I'm filling in with Glenn or another guest. And John McManus, who's the president of the John Birch Society. In chatting, we found out we have a number of mutual friends, some of whom we've known for a long time.
That's right.
John, welcome here.
Thank you.
What is the greatest violation of the Constitution, of our right to have a government that stays within the confines of the Constitution that you see today, Professor?
I think one of the things we see is equal protection. What you were dealing with there, and you've talked with the congressman a little bit, is the fact that we're applying laws in this point in time willy-nilly. One of the things that came out this last week that becomes most disturbing for somebody who looks at a free market move of things is the way in which they're looking at taxation, taxation of health care for unions as opposed to those that are non-union. Now, to me, that's not an equal use of constitutional authority or of law. It doesn't create a broad blanket by which we all apply the same rules.
Congressman Paul, John, talked about this when he said people today are judged by the groups to which they belong, something we call collectivism, which I've referred to in my books as the abominable doctrine of collectivism.
Good for you.
That my rights should be affected by not me as an individual and my personal moral behavior, but the group to which I belong. How dangerous is this doctrine today? It's in the law all over the place.
Well, it's very dangerous. But you asked, which is the part of the Constitution most violated? I think it's the first sentence. All legislative powers herein granted are vested in Congress.
Right.
Supreme Court can't make law, and they do it all the time.
Right.
Executive orders can't make law. They do it all the time.
Right.
But the herein granted part, to me, is even more important. The only legislative powers that Congress have are within the body of the Constitution.
There's 17 specific, unique, and discrete
and
powers.
not the necessary and proper clause.
Well, unfortunately, you know what you and I have talked about this on air, Professor. The necessary and proper clause, the so-called elastic clause, has been used by the courts to enable the Congress to enact all kinds of legislation never contemplated or even hinted at in the document.
It's gone far beyond judicial review. It is no longer a judicial review or reinterpretation as judicial legislation.
So just as an example, there's no power for the Congress to establish a national bank.
No.
But since the Congress has the power to raise and collect taxes and to spend the people's money, when they enacted a national bank, the Supreme Court said, well, this is necessary and proper. I'm showing the stretching with my hands.
We've got the elastic going.
Right, and therefore under that elastic clause they can do it.
And it's given, as was noted, and it's given to the courts to make that decision, which is not. Nowhere in the Constitution is it given to the courts.
And that's that doctrine, that the Congress can come up with any justification it wants, and the court will defer to the Congress on its justification, and it always goes in the direction of big government, and it so rarely
always
stops the government. That's what's brought us to where we are today.
Well, you know, our country became great not because of what